So in order for us to actually make this create serializer work the way we did with our user register form, we want to add this second email. So we want to make sure that our email is coming through twice. This is verifying the email. I believe it's more important to verify email addresses than it is to verify a username or a password. The password can be reset, but an email, once you lose their email, that makes a bigger problem for you than anything else. So having our users add their email confirmation will save a ton of time. Now, on the user side, having the password understood, now that is something that having duplicate passwords or checking passwords and stuff like that, that is something that you might also consider. It's going to be one or the other, because but the thing is, if they lose their email or they type their email in wrong, they can still get their password right, but everything else might fail. So I really think that the email is the way to go. All right, so since that's being said, we are going to go ahead and add a new field in here called email2, and it's going to be serializers.email field. So if we were to import just the serializers, so if we just did from REST Framework, import serializers, which is what you definitely see a lot with the code, this is how you would do it. But we haven't been doing that, so we're not going to do that now. So instead, we're going to actually import the email field on its own and get rid of this right here and change this to email2 of email field. And we'll put this email2 in here. Save that, and we'll look at our API. And we've got username, email address, email2, password. So we might want to change this from being email2 to confirm email. So let's just go label equals to confirm email. Save that. And we go back, refresh. Cool. Confirm email. All right, now we've got this stuff all set up. What we have to do now, since we have this field, we have to do some validation. Because in order for this create to work, because right now it doesn't, email2 doesn't matter. If you just filled it out, it's not going to validate or do anything there. So let's go ahead and create some validation for it. And this is going to be based off of the email field exactly, or the initial email field. So we'll do define validate email, and it's going to take self and value. And then we'll return the value. Okay, so value is the actual value that's being passed to the email. So I'm actually going to validate email 2. So this is the second field, right? You could do either field, it doesn't really matter. But this is only passing the value itself. It's not giving us any other data. So we have to get that other data. And I'll say data equals to self.get initial. And this will give us the initial data that's being passed. So it's not necessarily validated itself, but at the very least, it's going to allow us to get that original email or that first email address. So I'll say email1 is equal to data.get and email. So this one, again, being blank is okay. So we can use .get. So if for some reason email is not in there, then we will have to check email1 against value. So realistically, email2 is equal to value, right? So all we would say here is then we would want to check these two. If email1 is not equal to email2, then we're going to raise a validation error saying emails must match, or something like that. But emails must match is good. So that's our validation error. So we save it. We come back into register, hit post. First of all, it's saying these fields can't be blank, right? Notice that email address itself can be blank because Django by default will allow your email address to be blank. So if you were using a custom email, this would be even more important. So now that we got this, I also want to change that from email being blank. So I'm going to go ahead and just go copy this and say email. So this is going to override the default email field, and we'll say email. And I'll call it address again. Save that, refresh, hit continue. Now it's making all of them required. Okay, so now we'll do a username, ABC, we'll do ABC twice, and then ABC at Gmail, and then ABC whatever at Gmail, because we want to test that validation error. Password, I'm just going to do password, and boom, emails must match, right? So it's giving us that validation error, and it's going to happen regardless, and it's only going on that confirmation email because you're going to assume that one of these isn't going to match. Of course, you can raise that validation error on both places, but you would essentially write this validate twice, which let's go ahead and do that so you can just see it. So email, and then change this to email 2, and then there you go. That's all you had to do to change it to make sure that that's working. So we hit post, and notice now it's giving the field error on both of them. So we go back and match them, copying that, hit post, and no worries, created. This user's in there, ABC, ABC, go to users, ABC, ABC. Cool, so that's a way to validate those email addresses. Now there's another validation that I'm gonna add, and it has to do with just showing you one more thing with validation. So validate, it's gonna be self and data. This time it's actually passing in the data, so we don't have to use initial data. So now what I want to do is check if this email already exists. Of course, this validation can happen inside a validate email. In fact, it would more likely be happening there versus what we're about to do. But I just want to show you that you can use this to ensure that all this data is good. So we'll say email equals to data, and then email, and user, we'll say user query set or just query set, and it's going to be user.objects.filter email equals to email. And we'll say if user query set dot exists, then we're going to raise validation error and say this user has already registered. Now this validation already exists on the username itself, but it doesn't exist on the email. So after that, we'll just return the data, and that's it. So that's another way to do validation. So let's actually go in here and try that again. I'm going to use a different username. Well, actually, let's try it out with the same username so you can see. We hit post, and we say a user with this username already exists. Now, if I change the username and hit post, now it's saying this user has already been registered. Now, again, this right here would actually not go inside of that validation. Instead, I would put it in validate email. And again, you could do that validation twice, but that's kind of redundant and silly. But we also want to put, let's say, email is equal to email 1, or email 2 actually, rather. So it's going to validate the current one, or just the value, whatever that is. All right, so let's do that. And that's really what we want to see, except for this validation. But I did want to mention that you can do a general validation. We refresh in here, hit post, and it says this user has already registered, or an email with this user, whatever, has already registered. So this is preventing our API from allowing these kinds of users from actually authenticating at all or registering for their account. It isn't necessarily something that we did with the registration form itself, and actually it is. So it is something that we already did. So we definitely did it on the user register form for the general model itself. This is allowing us to prevent us from having a custom user model. If we did a custom user model, then we could build it right into the model that the user or the email has to be unique. In this case, we just are doing it through the validation efforts of registration. Okay, so if you have any questions on what we did here, let us know. Otherwise, in the next one, we're going to actually start doing our user login serializer. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.